television footage from the 1970s, 80s, and 90s that didn't make it into the episode was quickly destroyed, particularly if shot on film. Today's shows are made with the understanding of a home release. We also live in a different world, technologically speaking. Everything is digital, whereas back then, everything had a physical print. In fact, most shows shot on film developed only the chosen take. Editing decisions were made on set to save money. The outcome of this is that these shows have virtually no supplemental material. It makes it that much more difficult to get the true story of what occurred during the show's run. And this is the objective of my show, to get the truth instead of folklore perpetuated by the cast. I think people as a whole tend to look back and romanticize things from their life. But when you're actually experiencing it, the feelings are quite different, and that's what I am on a quest to find. When I was a kid, I loved Christmas of 1996. I got everything I asked for, mainly because I didn't ask for much. I look back on it fondly, but the more I think about it, it wasn't all great. When we woke up, my mother discovered that she had forgotten to charge her camcorder, and there was no way we were opening our gifts without documentation. We had to wait for an hour and a half for the battery to finish charging. Obviously, this is a hard thing for a child to deal with on Christmas morning. Within about 30 minutes, we all lashed out at each other. This was not pleasant, and definitely not something that should happen on what's supposed to be a joyous holiday. This is what I had been trying to forget. Call me cynical, but the memories we try to erase in our minds are usually the most interesting. Funny ending to that story is that once my mother finally started filming, the battery died 6 minutes later. Indeed, Saved by the Bell is the show some love to hate and others hate to miss. It inspired a generation of crappy, formulaic television for teens and tweens, but it was and will always be the first show of its kind. That counts for something. I always say jokingly that it was the TGIF show that never was. It reminds me of that kind of programming, but it was its own thing. From the Saturday morning lineup to primetime TV. This is Stoned Television History, Saved by the Bell.
I know I'm in a mess, and my dog ate all my homework last night. Riding low on my chair, know that I'm in, and it in tomorrow, it'll be alright. It's alright, 'cause I'm saved by the bell. It's alright, 'cause I'm saved by the bell. It's alright, 'cause I'm saved by the bell.
Good Morning Miss Bliss premieres on the Disney Channel. This was the very first iteration of Saved by the Bell, well before it was called that. None of the DVDs of Bell include this, as it only featured Hayley Mills and none of the future stars. Even Belding was played by a different actor. This has become the unofficial pilot of Bliss, something the creators wish to forget ever existed. I'm a huge fan of Saved, and even I'm saying, it's really not that good. The only thing redeeming about the episode is that it includes performances by a very young Jaleel White and the now deceased Jonathan Brandis. It's sad to watch, as his character is coping with the untimely death of his brother. Brandis himself died at a young age. The official pilot, entitled Summer Love, introduces us to Zach Morris, Screech, and Lisa. Kelly, Jesse, and AC all came later, once the name was changed. Technically speaking, the very first episode, called Saved by the Bell, was Dancing to the Max, with guest star Casey Kasem. It's interesting to note that when the episode begins, Zach, Screech, and Lisa are seated together, while Slater, Jesse, and Kelly are seated separately. The formerly Miss Bliss episodes have a certain charm to them. They were obviously produced for much less money. The stories are mostly told through the perspective of Miss Bliss, and the pace is noticeably slower. So today I'm smoking a Founders District Standard Pre-Roll. I don't know if you can see that on there, but that's what we're smoking, and that's what I'm lighting up right now as the story continues.
Thought we'd always be together.
So clearly the problem was that the show was something a teacher would never watch. So it was reformatted to be on NBC, and the two characters who scored the lowest, Mikey and Nikki, amongst test audiences, were cut. And I really feel bad for them because they never worked in show business again. I wonder, is it safe to assume that this experience is what traumatized them from the entertainment industry? So the new setting was a high school, which would no longer require Miss Bliss, their 8th grade teacher. It did, however, include Belding, who seemed to follow these kids around wherever they went, including Hawaii. To add more to this, the locale of the show was changed from Indiana to California. Now, for people who find plot holes in the show, although it can make a fun game, I have to remind you that the show never made sense, even from the beginning. Sitcoms generally make little to no sense, even the great ones. Look at Seinfeld. Seinfeld was completely unrealistic, but that razor-sharp dialogue, man, more than made up for it. Interestingly enough, Michael Richards was offered the role of Screech's father, but turned it down. Apparently so did everyone, because his father was never shown. Needless to say, producing a hit series is extremely difficult. It's even harder when you work with a child or a pet. With a cast made up of entirely children, it is almost impossible. To make matters worse, the young actors didn't always get along, and they struggled to memorize their lines. As non-traditional as a television schedule must seem, Saved by the Bell was a Monday through Friday gig. Monday was the read-through, and this only included the cast. Guest stars would arrive later for rehearsal. Tuesdays and Wednesdays were devoted to blocking and getting the young actors off script. Thursday was dress rehearsal as well as suck-up day. This was the one day they rehearsed in front of network execs who all had very strong opinions. On Friday, the show was finalized and performed for a live audience. Okay, so it was not easy to find cast interviews where they talked about the actual show instead of just the very general, oh, we worked hard and had a blast. So, unfortunately, this has left me no choice but to tell stories from Diamond's book that I believe are true. Maybe. Not maybe, I'm definitely going to do it, but I'm saying maybe they're true. I don't know, you be the judge.
According to Diamond, Dennis Haskins was a very nice man, but simply put, had no idea how to talk to women. On one such occasion, he was having a conversation with a stand-in named Penny Nichols when suddenly she told him to fuck off. It caught the attention of the entire cast and crew, but when asked, neither of them wanted to talk about it. They didn't speak to each other on set for the remainder of the show's run. Peter Engel was worried Tiffany Amber would get heavy like her mother, so he made craft services provide only fresh fruit and vegetables. While working on another show, Mark Paul was seriously injured, which delayed the show's production for 6 months. Mark Paul, Dustin, and Mario made a bet with each other to take a Polaroid of their penises and slide it under Elizabeth Berkley's dressing room. Apparently, Dustin was the only one who actually went through with it. He alleged she never mentioned it to him, but kept the picture to show friends. A female extra was rude to Dustin Diamond in front of Mark Paul and Tiffany Amber, much to their amusement. He retaliated by pissing in her purse. In Season 1, Slater's Friend, during the funeral scene, the young cast couldn't keep it together. The shots were shortened to make their laughing less noticeable. Peter Engel was getting very angry and even threatened to dock their pay. Engel hated the finished episode so much that it didn't air until the final season. Elizabeth Berkley was written out of the rockumentary episode after an injury she sustained during rehearsal. Every college year's episode has bloopers during the closing credits. Once, Mark Paul created his own in hope that it would make it to air. He knocked on the door to his dorm and, holding a condom, entered singing Trojan Man. The audience found it hilarious, but Peter Engel was not amused and screamed at Mark Paul for trying to sabotage the show. After cussing at Mark Paul, he stormed out of the stage. Engel didn't allow cussing on set, so this tirade not only surprised the spectators, but also terrified the cast, especially Mark Paul.
The incident was never brought up again by anyone. Dustin Diamond claimed after the backlash of his book that it was ghostwritten. He was to have final say before publishing, but before he was handed a manuscript, it was already released. I find this a little hard to believe. Considering it was marketed and sold as a tell-all book, I don't believe him, his surprise to these claims. One of which is that Mark Paul and Tiffany Amber had a drug-induced orgy with Engel, the show's born-again Christian showrunner with 20 years of sobriety. Another claim is that Diamond, while still a minor, had a sexual relationship with Linda Mancuso, then head of children's programming at NBC. She died of cancer before he wrote the book. This puts his douchebag meter in the red, considering his book is a litany of calling out every successful child actor from the 80s and 90s on their douchebaggery. Yes, I made that into a word. He's a prototypical narcissist, a failure who will never admit to his own failures. He wanted his character to be star of Saved, and he resents every other cast member for being better than him. Now, when I say better, I mean better. Better acting, better attitude, better at life. Look, I'm willing to believe that when they were young, their egos were out of control, which the show and its success only inflamed. Probably not the only thing that got inflamed. In the end of the day, it was still just a kids show that was only a hit amongst the teen audience. Adults didn't watch the show. They do now, but not back then. My mom hated not only the show, but how often we watched it. She probably wouldn't have disliked it so much if we didn't watch it every day. Diamond makes several allusions in his book to Tiffany Amber Thiessen and her promiscuity. Although in his book, he gets it up for anyone who will have it. He even points out this hypocrisy in his book only to continue chastising her. And this is why my heart really goes out to her. She admitted on the Howard Stern show to losing her virginity at 14. Why would she admit to that, but not to sleeping with Mark Paul or Mario, as Dustin claims? Being deflowered at 14 is a much more embarrassing admission. I believe her, mainly because she doesn't seem bitter and spiteful. He does. She actually sympathizes with him for the life he had, losing his mother when he was only 19. I mean, this is a pretty beautiful sentiment to have for someone who dragged your name through the mud and made a buck doing it. Mark Paul also denounced the book, saying he has to make a living somehow, implying, Diamond's lack of acting work. So I was not able to read Peter Engel's book, I Was Saved by the Bell. I said that weird because I was stoned. I'm trying one more time. I did not get a chance to read Peter Engel's book, I Was Saved by the Bell. I have, however, watched enough interviews to gather that he is a very nice and hardworking person. The show was on life support very early on. I do believe that his perfectionism and maintained positivity with the cast, crew, and NBC is what ultimately led to its enormous success. And the rest, as I say, is stoned television history. So in closing, I just wanted to add that I'm very stoned and a little paranoid, but it's alright. Because